Hey there, everyone. Today I'm going to be giving tips on how I like to manage my 40-man roster. We're going to be looking at three critical times at the end of the season, right before the Rule 5 draft, and during the Rule 5 draft, and in the preseason slash beginning of the year. So the first thing that you need to do is actually not who you want to add to your 40-man roster at the end of the season, but who shouldn't be there. So we got guys like Steven Vogt here. He is about to hit free agency, but I'm just going to release him outright at the end of the season to make room on my roster for other players I like better. Got Alex Young here. He's not a bad pitcher, so I'm not just going to get rid of him, but he's certainly not worth having on the 40-man roster. 28-year-old, really no potential to him. Christian Walker, just not a great hitting first baseman. That doesn't really have value. We're going to waive and DFA him as well. Josh Van Meter, he's a utility guy. I mean, he can play a lot of positions, but he's not really good at any of them. His hitting is bad. He's getting DFA'd as well. This is a player where if you really need a utility man on your roster, though, you would probably keep him. Joaquim Soria, he's not the best reliever in the world, but he's not bad. He's hitting free agency. We'll just keep him on our roster for now because there's no reason not to. Riley Smith, another bad pitcher. He gets waived and DFA'd. David Peralta, he's old. He doesn't look good. He's getting waived to DFA'd, although this is a guy that you would trade ideally if you could find a partner to take him. Tim LeCastro, he's not very good, but he's not a horrible utility outfielder with his speed base running, so I'm not going to get rid of him. Stephon Crichton, just not a very good reliever. He's getting waived and DFA'd, and it is important that you clear off space on your 40-man roster since this will allow you to hold better players. Tower Clippard, he's got a buyout, so we're just going to release him, which triggers the uh, option. We've got Asdrubal Cabrera. I think he's about to hit free agency. He doesn't look very good. We can release him, and so on and so forth until you've cleared out all of the players on your 40-man roster that you're not happy with. I'm just gonna waive in DFA or Caleb Smith real quick because he's in arbitration. He's really bad. Next thing you want to look at, are there any players that should be on my 40-man roster immediately? And these guys are actually not going to be added to your 40-man roster, but you see someone like, we got Dominic Fletcher here. He looks like he's not a bad outfielder if we really needed a right fielder next season. He's someone we could absolutely do, so we're just going to add him to the short list. We're not going to add him to our roster yet. Seth Beer, not a bad hitter. He's a possibility. Domingo Leyba, not a bad utility infielder potentially, so he's a possibility. Jose Herrera, he's not a bad potentially backup catcher, so we'll shortlist him as well. And we're just going to keep our eyes on those types of players, but we're not going to call them up quite yet. The next thing that we're going to do is actually, if you have any free agents you want to sign, you're going to assume to the free agent signing period, and at that point sign them. Make sure you have the 40-man roster space where you're able to clear it before you sign a free agent, or make sure that you have players you're willing to trade if a free agent were to sign with you. But next, we're going to go up to the Rule 5 draft, which is really the next major period where you need to look at your 40-man roster. All right, so here we are at the Rule 5 draft. Before we actually begin the draft at all, the first thing we want to do is go to the draft pool. One thing I highly recommend doing is going to your filter and filtering by players who are inside of your organizations. You'll notice here I have the filter organization is Arizona. This is going to show me all of my players who are currently up for the Rule 5 draft. So here we got guys like Drew Ellis, guys like Stuart Fairchild, John Duplantier, Geraldo Perdomo. Not too many huge names here. I think the big ones to me are going to be Geraldo Perdomo, who is a borderline top prospect. I'm going to protect him just because I really don't want him to be drafted that batch. Jose Cuerpa, actually not a bad fielder, pretty solid bat too, so we're going to protect him as well, just in case. And Stuart Fairchild, he looks like he could be a decent utility outfielder, solid defense with okay hitting, so we're going to protect him just because if he is in a position where we need a 40-man roster spot, we'll trade him or DFA him. And another thing, guys, if your 40-man roster spot space is tight, don't protect players that you don't actually intend to have a significant role for, or at least are not at a high risk to be drafted. All right, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to look for players who are not in our organization and try to identify some guys that could be good for Rule 5 draft picks. There is no downside to taking a player in the Rule 5 draft, you should completely fill your 40-man roster by the time you're done with a Rule 5 draft. Literally, the worst thing that can happen is you just release the player back to their previous organization. Best case scenario, they hit TCR, they're a superstar now. So you're the best players available here. You got a reliever from the Houston Astros, Wanderson Charles. Not a great control pitcher, but he's a guy I'm going to shortlist. I like the stuff movement combo. He could be effective with a little more control. Camilo Duvall, one of the top relief prospects in the game on the A's. He's got good potential. We're going to shortlist him. Moises Gomez, lots of control on him. I don't like the movement, but hey, he could TCR it. We're going to shortlist him. We got Joel Pujuero here, another very good looking reliever. This is a guy I think could absolutely stick on our roster. Shortlist him. Jordan Herrero, another really good looking reliever. Love that movement. We're shortlisting him. Casey Kalich, another really good looking reliever. He goes on the short list. Jonah Dawn, I don't like him too much, but I mean, maybe later in the draft we draft him. Ultimately, you're just going through, you're looking for players who, anyone you're interested in. I'm also going to generally look at players with higher batting potential in case there's like a two-way or an undervalued hitter like this guy. Not a bad hitter, but he's not valued too well by overall. This guy looks pretty good as well for the Rays. It's all these Rays hitters actually, funnily enough. So yeah, I'll look for players I'm interested in, and then I'm going to go to the draft and begin it. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is just take a player, any player I'm interested in. I'm going to keep doing this. Keep going through the draft. Take every single player you want to have in your organization. And remember, there's no downside to literally fill your 40-man roster with the players you want to have. You're just going to keep on going and drafting players. This is especially useful when you're like in a rebuild and you're just filling up your roster. There will be a lot of good players that you'd be able to take. So yeah, just take all the players you're interested in, fill your 40-man roster, and if you need to, you could just release those players, the worst ones that you drafted, because it's not a big deal. All right, next we're going to go to the preseason and talk about managing your 40-man roster there. All right, here we are in the preseason, and handling spring training is going to be an entirely different video, but I'm going to be basically just promoting every single player that I saw who I found interesting when I was going through at the end of the season for possible 40-man candidates. All my top prospects, basically everybody who's eventually a major leaguer or a borderline major leaguer or whatever, I'm going to promote and get a look at in spring training. So you'll promote players, you'll set your rosters, you'll sim through spring training. Prospects who make your roster will go on your 40-man roster. You'll trade away players who you don't need. That'll make up some 40-man roster space. And ultimately, the only time you really do need to worry about your 40-man roster is if you're completely full pretty much, you need to figure out a way to make some space there. Or during the Rule 5 draft, because obviously 40-man roster space is incredibly valuable during the Rule 5 draft. But ultimately, just keep as few players on your 40-man roster as you can at all times. Don't just add players willy-nilly. Only add them if they're playing on your major league team or need protection from a Rule 5 draft pick. And do not be afraid to DFA players as needed to protect your more important players in the Rule 5 draft, or to draft better players in the Rule 5 draft, or to free up a roster spot for a free agent or trade acquisition. Let me know if you guys have any questions. I hope this video was helpful, and I'll see you on the next one.